Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of Magic the Chattering with your host, me, Demir today, gone tomorrow. Today we have part 2 of our Commander focused main set review for Outlaws of Thunder Junction. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Kellen the Kid. Kellen the Kid is a green, a white and a blue for a 3/3 human fairy rogue with flying and lifelink. Whenever you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, you may cast a permanent spell with equal or lesser mana value from your hand without paying its mana cost. If you don't, you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. A 3/3 lifelinker for 3 mana is a good rate, and the ability seems pretty powerful as well. Getting to cheap mana cost is always powerful in Commander, and he does it pretty well. You must cast things from other than your hand to trigger him, and that is doable in his 3 colours. Maybe not as easy as it would have been with a red pip in his mana cost, but it's still quite doable. Kellen overall seems pretty well balanced and pretty powerful. Really good design. 6 to 8 on power level. The ability is good, but I'm not sure it's CDH good. On to the next card. Crown, Violent Cacophony. Crown, Violent Cacophony is 2, a blue and a red for a 3/2 zombie horror with flying. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, put a 1/1 counter on Crown, Violent Cacophony and draw a card. Another one of the uncommon legendary cycle, Crown seems to fail to deliver here. Overcosted slightly at 4 mana, I think it's typical for a lower powered spellslinger commander. What I can say is, for a positive for Crown however, is that he draws you cards pretty consistently, and at least he scales with the game. 4 to 7 power level wise, just doesn't seem a particularly interesting design for me. Up next, Laughing Jasper Flint. Laughing Jasper Flint is 1, a black and a red for a 4/3 lizard rogue. Creatures you control but don't own are mercenaries in addition to their other types. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top X cards of target opponent's library, where X is the number of outlaws you control. Till end of turn, you may cast spells from among those cards, and mana of any type can be spent to cast those spells. Now I really like the design here. An outlaw deck that plays with your opponent's cards. It is a little mana intensive, however. It does fuel its own ability though, so turning any creatures you steal into outlaws gives you more things as the game progresses. An interesting ability and well costed at 3 mana. I'm a big fan of this one, 5 to 7 on power level. I'd like to go a bit higher than that, because I do really like the design, but it is a slow, attrition based strategy and CDH just seems a step too far. Up next, Lazav, Familiar Stranger. 1, a blue and a black for a 1/4 shapeshifter. When you commit a crime, put a 1/1 counter on Lazav, Familiar Stranger. Then you may exile a card from your graveyard. If a creature card was exiled this way, you may have Lazav become a copy of that card until end of turn. This ability triggers only once each turn. Now, Lazav Demir Mastermind was my first commander deck I ever built, so I have a real soft spot for this character. However, this iteration of a Lazav is a little boring, and the ability stops you from choosing the same creature multiple times by exiling it, and he only copies until end of turn, so altogether very underwhelming for me. I've honestly got not much to say about it. A 3 to 5 to power level, I don't think its ability is very impactful at all, to be honest. Up next, Lila, Undefeated Slickshot. 1, a blue and a red for a 3/3 human rogue with prowess. Whenever you cast a multicolored instant or sorcery spell from your hand, exile that spell instead of putting it into your graveyard as it resolves. If you do, it becomes blotted. Now, Lila has a very interesting design. I actually think this card is sneaky powerful, and it reminds me a bit of O'Hare. But multiple cast of a single spell really adds up to good card advantage engine, and Lila has the added flexibility of having the option of when to cast them. The prowess on there as well will take full advantage of that plot ability, choosing when you can cast them and how much additional power you can get Lila. Overall, this card is well costed, has an interesting ability, and seems like a pretty powerful design. 6 to 9 for power level. I can see a world where Lila is at a CEDH table in our near future. Up next, Magda, the Horde Master. 1 and a red for a 2/2 Dwarf Berserker. Whenever you commit a crime, create a tapped treasure token. This ability triggers only once each turn. Sacrifice 3 treasures, create a 4/4 red Scorpion Dragon creature token with flying and haste. Activate only as a sorcery. I think the once per turn is probably for the best with this one actually. And the treasures coming in tapped, so Wizards is really trying to drop the power level for things that make treasures. What I don't like here is that you can only do the second ability at sorcery speed. I think you lose a lot of flexibility with that, and it feels like they may have done a little too much to underpower this card. It's a fine payoff in a treasure deck, making you 4/4 hasty flyers every turn, if you have a way to make multiple treasures, that is, of course. But I do think it's probably one of the least efficient ways of doing this in Commander. 4 to 6 on power level is the Commander for me. In the 99, I think she gets a little bit better. Up next, Malcolm the Eyes. Malcolm the Eyes is a blue and a red for a 2/2 Siren Pirate, flying in haste. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, investigate. Over the years, we've seen many cards with, when you cast your second spell, do something. And this one seems pretty good, especially if you care about artifacts. Getting a clue with your second ability seems like a good effect if that's what you're after. And if you have ways of taking advantage of clue generation, I'm sure you can build a pretty fun deck with Malcolm at the helm. Power level wise, I don't think he's particularly high. 4 to 6, well balanced, if not a little bit boring, because we have seen this effect quite a few times before, just not specifically investigated. Marchesa, Dealer of Death. Blue, black, and a red for a 3/4 human rogue. Whenever you commit a crime, you may pay 1. If you do, look at the top 2 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand, and the other into your graveyard. As a commander, I think this card just doesn't do enough. 1 additional mana every time you commit a crime to look at the top 2 cards of your library and pick one to go into the hand, one into the graveyard just doesn't seem particularly exciting to me. I see the value in filling up your graveyard, but there's plenty of quicker, more efficient ways of doing that. For me, this is a 4 to 7 on power level. Marchesa feels pretty uninspiring to me. Up next, Miriam, Haired Whisperer. A green and a white for a 3/2 human druid. As long as it's your turn, mounts and vehicles you control have hexproof. Whenever a mount or vehicle you control attacks, put a 1/1 counter on. Another of the uncommon legendary cycle that just doesn't seem that interesting to me. The hexproof is nice, but only on your turn makes it significantly worse, and the +1/+1 is not very impactful. 3 to 6 on power level, a green-white vehicles deck does sound pretty fun though. Up next, Obeka, Splitter of Seconds. Obeka, Splitter of Seconds is a 1, a blue, a black, a red for a 2/5 Ogre Warlock with Menace. Whenever Obeka, Splitter of Seconds deals combat damage to a player, you get that many additional upkeep steps after this phase. This is a very powerful card in Casual Commander. So many cards care about upkeeps, and getting multiple upkeeps seems like an excellent way to take full advantage of that. I think my favourite thing that this deck has going for it is that you'll always have more cards in the future that care about upkeeps, so you can consistently upgrade this deck. However, I think you do need a lot of setup pieces for this deck, and that makes it a little slow for CEDH. With that in mind, it's a solid 6 to 8 power level, a new kill on entry commander, but if you can keep it around and connect, it'll be very powerful. Up next, Rakdos, the Muscle. 2 black, red. For a legendary creature, Demon Mercenary, 6/5, with flying and trample. Whenever you sacrifice another creature, exile cards equal to its mana value from the top of target player's library. Until your next end step, you may play those cards, and mana of any type can be spent to cast those spells. Sacrifice another creature, Rakdos the Muscle gains indestructible until end of turn. Tap it, activate only once each turn. Very well costed, Rakdos gives a new way to play my favourite archetype, Mill. And of course, that's how I'd build it. But it's probably more efficient to build it the way it's supposed to be built. Procure big creatures, sack them for big exile effects, and cast what you need from your opponents. Power level wise, 4 to 8 I think. It really depends how you build this one, but it could be very powerful in the wrong hands. Up next, Riku of Many Paths. Riku of Many Paths is a green, a blue, and a red for a 3/3 human wizard. When you cast a modal spell, choose up to X, where X is the number of times you chose a mode for that spell. Exile the top card of your library. Until the end of turn, you may play it. Put a 1/1 counter on Riku. It gains trample until end of turn. Create a 1/1 blue bird token with flying. Riku is a fun one, I think. 3 mana to get some extra benefits from your modal spells is a pretty good price, and the actual abilities Riku has are pretty good. Get some card advantage, go wide, or go tall. That makes this deck very good at adapting to whatever game you're playing, much like the modal spells you'll be casting. 5 to 8 on power level. I think this deck seems pretty versatile at any pod, and you can have a lot of fun. Up next, Roxanne, Starfall Savant. Roxanne, Starfall Savant is 3, a red and a green for a 4/3 cat druid. Whenever Roxanne enters the battlefield or attacks, create a tapped colorless artifact token named Meteorite with, when Meteorite enters the battlefield, it deals 2 damage to any target, and tap, add 1 mana of any color. Whenever you tap an artifact token for mana, add 1 mana of any type the artifact token produced. Now Roxanne has a really interesting set of abilities. Make a mana rocks on ETB and attack, they hit things for 2 when they enter, and that second ability gives you so much value as the game goes on. Token doublers also work great here, as well as any artifact synergies you might have. 5 mana seems like a good rate for all these abilities you get. Overall a solid 6 to 8, just a tad slow for CDH, but I love the design here. Up next, Satoru, the Infiltrator. A blue and a black for a 2/3 human ninja rogue with menace. When Satoru and or one or more other non-token creatures enter the battlefield under your control, if none of them were cast or no mana was spent to cast them, draw a card. Really well costed at 2 mana, Satoru gives you an interest and restriction for his card draw effect. Clearly he was meant to work well with Ninjutsu, however Manifest and Cloak also work pretty well here. I like that there's no once per turn clause here as well. You can really get some value out of Satoru if you build him a certain way. Power level 5 to 7 for me, mainly because if you want Ninjutsu you're probably building Yuriko, but this is a good option at a slightly lower power level. Your opponents are probably less likely to kill Satoru than Yuriko as well, so that's a good decision to run him instead. Up next, Selvala, Eagle Trailblazer. 2, a green and a white for a 4/5 Elf Scout with Vigilance. Whenever you cast a creature spell, create a 1/1 red mercenary creature token with tap, target creature you control gets +1/+0 until end of turn, activate only as a sorcery. Tap, choose a colour. Add 1 mana of that colour for each different power among creatures you control. In a creature-based strategy, Selvala is a well-costed creature with a decent effect. However, that second ability really rewards you for your deck building, and I've always had a soft spot for Commander that makes you change your deck building slightly. I think it seems pretty reasonable that you'll be able to get 3 to 4 mana out of her reliably off that second ability, so it's a question of how you build it. Token strategy seems like the easiest way, but maybe something more interesting you could do with it. 4 to 8 power level seems quite good if you build your deck right. Up next, Tai Joaquin, Perfect Shot. A red and a white for a 2/3 human mercenary. Whenever a source you control deals non-combat damage to a creature equal to that creature's toughness, draw a card. X, tap. If a source you control would deal non-combat damage to a permanent or player this turn, it deals that much damage plus X instead. I'm really conflicted on this card. I love having new ways to build Boros decks, but I'm not sure I like this card or not. On the face of it, it's 2 mana for a card draw engine in Boros, and that I like, but it does feel very mana intensive, and I don't like that in a colour pair that historically struggles to get mana, we've got a really mana intensive commander here. I'm really conflicted on this one. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. I can't really decide a power level for this. It feels like there could be one card that just really busts it wide open that I'm not thinking of. Let me know down below. The Gitrog, Ravenous Ride. 3, a black and a green for a 6/5 Trample Haste. Whenever the Gitrog, Ravenous Ride deals combat damage to a player, you may sacrifice a creature that's saddled at this turn. If you do, draw X cards, then put up to X lands from your hand onto the battlefield tapped, where X is the sacrifice creature's power. Saddle 1. Now this is a modern mythic to a T. If you connect once with this, your opponents are in trouble, because at that point you have more than enough mana to replay it when they do kill it, and make no mistakes, if you play the Gitrog, it will get killed multiple times. This is a powerhouse deck if you build your deck right, and the haste specifically makes it really difficult to deal with, swinging in the turn it comes in, and really punishing your opponents for not having open mana or blockers. The Gitrog is a powerful card as long as you build your deck with enough high power, low mana value creatures. You're looking at a minimum 7 power level, but I can easily see a world where this gets into a high 9 with the right cards. Up next, Tiny Bones, the Pickpocket. 1 black for a 1/1 skeleton rogue with Death Touch. Whenever Tiny Bones deals combat damage to a player, You may cast a target non-land permanent card from that player's graveyard and spend mana over any colour to cast it. I have a feeling this will be one of those commanders that people sigh at when they see come in. Low cost with a powerful ability on combat damage that also has Death Touch just to make blocking it feel really punishing. Another card that feels really modern in its design. 1 mana is crazy for this ability and the evasiveness. You'll need to remove Tiny Bones 3 to 4 times before the cost becomes prohibitive to play him. And a really good card at this cost, but I do think it's not really CDH viable due to its ability to rely on your opponents. I think it really needs your opponents to have things worth taking out of the bin. A 5 to 8 on power level, high level casual commander for me. Vadmir, New Blood. 1 on a black for a 2/2 vampire rogue. Whenever you commit a crime, put a 1/1 counter on Vadmir, New Blood. This ability triggers only once each turn. As long as Vadmir has 4 or more +1/+1 counters on it, it has Menace and Lifelink. Now, this is another card that's really hampered by the once per turn clause. It really lets the card down here. Without it, I'm sure you could build a really powerful deck with Vadmir. Menace and Lifelink is nice for 4 counters, but if you could do that quicker than once per turn, it would be a really, really good card. I don't think not having once per turn would make it too good either. It would have just been a solid mono black Voltron commander. As it is, it's a 4 to 6 for me. A good card let down by 1 line of text. Up next, Vile Smasher, Gleeful Grenadier. A black and a red for a 3/2 Golem Mercenary. Whenever another outlaw enters the battlefield under your control, Vile Smasher deals 1 damage to the target opponent. Another one of the uncommon legendaries. This is another one that doesn't feel like it needed legendary. If you want to play an Outlaws deck, you're probably just going to play Olivia or Vihan, and I think that Vile Smasher is just okay in those decks. If you're really going to build a Vile Smasher, I can only imagine you're going to try and give him Infect and take advantage of that ability. A 4 to 6 on power level, a fine limited card, not really sure it's up to the task in Commander. Up next, Vraska, the Silencer. Vraska the Silencer is 1, a black and a green for a 3/3 Gorgon Assassin with Death Touch. Whenever a non-token creature an opponent controls dies, you may pay 1. If you do, return that card to the battlefield tapped under your control. It's a treasure artifact with tap. Sacrifice this artifact at 1 mana of any colour, and it loses all other card types. My first read of this card, I thought, oh, this looks like a pretty good value engine on a sacrifice deck, and then I played against it and realised how oppressive it really is. If you're the type of player who enjoys using your graveyard, then this is probably the worst hate card I've ever played against. I found it incredibly oppressive to play against, partly due to the fact I was playing a sacrifice deck myself. This meant all my sacrifice synergies were turned off for 1 mana from my opponent. Now if you're not playing a sacrifice deck, you might think you've gotten away with it, but not really. Because Vraska really incentivized the player to remove a lot of things from the board for value. So yes, Vraska is very powerful, but it falls into the same pitfalls of Tiny Bones. At the end of the day, you're relying on your opponents playing things worth killing and stealing, so I think CDH might be a little out of reach for Vraska. I'll say a 5 to 8 on power level, but I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Is this a fun card or too oppressive? Let me know what you think. Up next, Wily Duke, a teen hero. 1, a green and a white for a 4/2 human ranger with vigilance. Whenever Wily Duke becomes tapped, you gain 1 life and draw a card. I do like this card. It has its issues, but it's an interesting design, and the card and life gain on tap are pretty reasonable at a good cost. However, vigilance to stop you from triggering on attack is interesting. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, but it does make your work a little harder. I spoke about Annie Flash, the veteran, in part 1, and Wily Duke wants a pretty similar shell. Drum Bellower, Seaboard Muse, and a vehicle package make an interesting and fun deck to play. 5 to 7 on power level. I don't think it's particularly powerful, but it will draw you a lot of cards if you build it right. And while not technically a main set commander, I couldn't leave this last one out. It's our last card of the day, and it's of course, Loot, the key to everything. Loot, the key to everything, is a green, a blue, and a red for a 1/2 Beast Noble with Ward 1. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top X cards of your library, where X is the number of card types among non-land permanents you control. You may play those cards this turn. I do have a loot deck, and it's a lot of fun to play. It's an excellent card advantage if you build your deck right, 4 to 5 cards a turn is not unlikely, but just 2 to 3 is still pretty good. Loot is very well costed at 3 mana, and any exiled synergies really shine in this deck. Faldorn, Dreadwolf Herald, and the previously mentioned Doc Orlock both really play well in this deck. I can see your CDH deck running this as a value commander to help dig for combos. Loot is in perfect colours for his exile synergy, and this makes him pretty easy to build around. Easily a 6 to 8 on power level, and a fun commander to play. And that's it for the video. If you enjoyed that, please leave a like, subscribe, and if you've played any of these commanders, let me know in the comments how you found them. Follow me on all socials at Demir_TGT. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.